Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Carol Williams, and I'm a board member with the Food Pantries for the Capital District. I will be moderating today's panel. Welcome to New York City Innovations in Client Choice and Collective Action. Before I introduce you to today's speakers, I'll cover a few housekeeping items. As our speakers discuss today's topics, please enter any questions you have in the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen. I will be monitoring the chat box throughout our discussion and ask our panelists as many questions as time allows. We will begin with client choice and then move to collective action. For food pantries, client choice has traditionally been a question of kale versus collards, but our discussion today will explain how it's much more than that. Our speakers will discuss how delivery mechanisms, engagement, and where services occur are all key choices that impact our customers. Our speakers will also discuss collective action. All three are members of a collaborative which began as a focus on collective food purchasing. During COVID, the group quickly expanded their focus beyond purchasing with weekly calls to share best practices and resources through the challenges posed by the pandemic. The work of the collaborative highlights the potential wins for pantries and soup kitchens who work together. We're joined by three excellent speakers today. Greg Silverman is Westside Campaign Against Hunger's Executive Director, as well as a dynamic chef, restaurateur, and longtime leader in the anti-hunger movement. Westside Campaign Against Hunger is at the forefront of alleviating hunger by ensuring all New Yorkers have access with dignity to a choice of healthy food and supportive services. Jessica Chait is the Managing Director of Food Programs at Met Council, responsible for the Kosher Food Network, the largest free kosher distribution system in the world that brings visibility to food insecurity in Jewish communities. And Ben Carrick is a senior consultant at Karen Karp and Partners, a food systems consulting firm that works at the intersection of food, agriculture, and health. Thanks to the three of you for being with us today. Greg, do you mind kicking off our discussion on client choice by describing Westside Campaign Against Hunger's food programs and their impact?
Sure, and thanks for having me and the group here today. We're, as I was saying earlier, I wish we were all in person, and we will get back to that at some point. But in the meantime, we have to innovate, and I think that's what we're going to talk about today. Wisca's, like many emergency food providers, has been around for almost 40 years. But what's interesting for us is the side of that for almost 30 of those years, we've been doing client choice, and we consider ourselves one of the innovators in that model of saying, okay, let's let people shop for the foods they want, for their health, for their culture, for their tastes. My background is a chef and restaurant owner, so the choice of product is really important to me when I think about what I want to put on my plate or a plate of a customer. And so at Wisca, we've been operating for decades in client choice, serving tens of thousands of families. I mean, this year we're serving about 50,000 people, and it's a very different world than it was pre-pandemic. I think for our side of client choice, it also has to do with our social services, making sure all of our customers can get screened and get access to choice of benefits that they can have along with their food. So we have a team of 6 who are screening customers for benefits, helping them get access to whether it's SNAP, housing benefits, healthcare, all kinds of different benefits that are out there. It's sort of where we began, and it's where we're back to. And, in some ways, when Wisca and other pantries all started decades and decades ago, the lore or the story at Wisca was, customers were on the street and they were trading, peanut butter for canned tuna, right? Because they're like, I don't like this food, you don't like that food. And so we said, why are we making people just take whatever food we want? And in somewhat, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this later, like we've sort of we're back to that a little bit because of the pandemic, right? We've pre-boxed food for our customers. Luckily now we survey our customers on a regular basis. We know what their favorite foods are. We know what's most popular. We make sure it's healthy. We can make sure there's no ultra processed junk food that oftentimes is given to us. But, these are the choices and the questions we have to deal with grappling forward. Like, how do we institute choice? And it's not just food, but I'll just pause there.
Great. Thanks, Greg. Jessica, do you want to talk a little bit about programs at Met Council?
Sure. Thank you, Kara. And thank you all so much. It's been really a very lovely day, very invigorating and inspiring to hear from so many and to be with you all to talk about client choice and the innovations that our programs have been pursuing. As was shared, I'm the Managing Director of Food Programs at Met Council. Which really operates as a food bank. While we are not known as such, we don't have the official designation. We do have warehouses in Brooklyn that bring in bulk food, and our food is exclusively kosher. So while our pantries are open, the pantries we provide food to are open to people, New Yorkers of all backgrounds, and we're very encouraging and accepting of that. The reality is that when it comes to choice, that people have dietary restrictions and things oftentimes informed by religion, but not only, that limit the kinds of foods that people can consume. And so the idea of having a kosher food network where anybody, just as New York City is blessed to have almost 1,000 food pantries, which means that people don't have to travel very far to get the foods that they need. But if they do need kosher food, then going to a traditional pantry may not really give them the option to choose the foods that are appropriate for them. So in effect, the Kosher Food Network is in many ways expanding client choice just right there to say that there are places that you can go to access this food. Met Council also operates our own pantries with some actually co-located at our warehousing facilities, as well as throughout the city, including a mobile pantry, and then what we're going to talk about a little bit later, which is our digital innovations, which allow people to order remotely. Another kind of choice that we think is really important, which is allowing people to participate in the emergency food system in ways that are helpful and appropriate to them. I'll just conclude by saying that this year has been really extraordinary, I know, for all of us. We saw tremendous growth. Historically, our program saw about 5 to 6 million pounds of kosher food being distributed into the community. And in 2020, we distributed almost 16 million pounds of food. And this year, we're on track for, if the numbers continue, to be around 20 million pounds of food. So obviously, just really significant growth. And all of these again, these innovations that we're going to speak with are all tools that we've been able to deploy that really are designed to get more people who need this food, whether it's kosher or just general food that we have to offer, into the hands of the people who value those items and who can use them to best feed themselves and their families.
Great. Thank you, Jessica. Greg, do you want to talk a little bit about the specific innovations and what makes them innovative?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for Wisca, I mean, and I think Jessica and I guess we're both jumping into this a bit on the technology side a bit, right? And I think many people experience this in the pandemic. None of our seniors showed up, 14 months ago in March, right? I think it was 753 seniors didn't show up to pick up their food. We knew exactly who they were in our database, and we started reaching out to them to find out, did they need food? And so we started delivering food directly to people's doors. And that made us think about how, to your point, Kara, of like, is choice about kale versus collards only? Is it about produce? No, it's a lot more. The choice of your delivery mechanism is huge. It's about your time. It's about respecting people's time. It's about allowing people the freedom to, whether it's taking care of their grandkids or making sure their kids are doing remote schooling. And so we've been building out sort of a fresh direct model, as we have in New York, of like, we want to go end to end. We want customers to be able to choose their food and then have it delivered directly into their neighborhoods or their homes. I mean, this is just an evolution of choice. It's not good enough to say, Wisca for almost 30 years was forcing people to come get food. We were bringing people to food. That's not actually that dignified in that. Like, what dignity is to me is that you get food in the same mechanisms that everyone else can. And so that means bringing food to people instead of people to food. And so there's going to be a lot of ways this will happen in the future. I mean, obviously increasing SNAP and giving people cash to actually purchase what they want, where they want is the ideal. But one thing we can do right now is deliver the food to people's doors. I mean, I think we'll talk a little bit later about the collective side of it and the importance of that. But I think what we're seeing, the other innovation I'd bring up is just the collaboration Jessica and I were just on a call earlier, but in general, organizations are functioning as one in some ways. Like we're doing our own work, but then we're collaborating. And that seems simple and it seems obvious, but it's not, right? And normally we all just do our own little work. We feel good about ourselves. We pat ourselves on the back. We feel good that we fed some people, but that's not good enough. And if we actually want to really fight hunger, we have to do it in partnership.
Great, great. Jessica, is there anything you want to add? I know you were alluding to some technology innovations before.
Sure, thanks. So similar to things that WISCA is pursuing, Met Council 3 years ago was fortunate enough to receive a grant to pursue an online ordering system at several of our participating pantries. Our network, as you can see from the poster behind me, includes 40 food pantries that we support with essentially 100% of their food comes through our warehouse. So in our case, again, operating as a food bank, we have we made the dual investment in really using an inventory system that then can be pushed out at the participating pantries. And so all of those sites get inventory both physically and electronically from us. And then participating food pantries have the opportunity to make those menus available, that food available to their clients in the ordering mechanism that Greg mentioned, which is really like a Fresh Direct model. And this really came out of the question of how do we serve more people? And why is it that the Mayor's Office for Food Policy in New York City said that only 1 in 4 people who are food insecure are accessing food pantries? And there are a host of reasons. Obviously, shame and stigma remains sadly up on the list. But another is, as Greg mentioned, time. People have a lot of responsibilities. In cities like New York, people are commuting long distances at odd hours to get to their 1, 2, 3 jobs. There's a sense that somehow people, as if they don't have enough money to go to the grocery store, suddenly have enough time to wait online. We knew that wasn't true. We knew there was a real fallacy in there. And so this idea of investing in a system that could allow people to do their errands the way I do my errands or you do your errands, which is frankly often multitasking, right? Commuting and also paying my bills online or using my phone to contact other people or do the things that make the doctor's appointments or do the other things that I need to do in my life. Similarly, people who visit our pantries are both doing those things in their lives and have come to expect that. And honestly, as Greg mentioned, deserve that. There's waiting online is not a good use of anyone's time. I'm sure we've all felt that waiting online, whether it's to board an airplane or to wait for your luggage or get a taxi. It's not a good use of anyone's time. And these investments that we've made are really to say that the system as a whole should be bolstered so that we bear the burden and the individuals can go on doing the things that are not, that are better use of their time that'll allow them to focus on the things that are important in their lives.
That's great. That's great. A lot of what you said, I feel like your answer included a lot of the why of what you do. And so, I'd love to know if there's any other reasons of the why or the reason that you do the work you do with Client Choice and how you measure the success in that area.
I'll just quickly share, Greg's example of people swapping food outside of a pantry is one example. But even that is, that's not a horrible outcome. What's horrible is someone getting food and then not being able, like taking that home because they're in a rush and then finding that the food that they brought home, their kids are allergic to or that they themselves can't eat. And so this idea that suddenly this thing that we've been given or we give is supposed to help people actually can be a great source of disappointment, frustration, angst, anxiety, and people debating whether or not they're going to take risk. Like maybe they will feed their kid something that might have eggs in it or nuts in it because that's all they have in their food package that week when that thing isn't right for them. And so I think the idea of really empowering people to make the choices that are right for themselves and their families, as distinct from respecting their time, which is obviously very as I said, very important, is really critical to the motivation behind an investment like this, and saying that people should be able to access the things that are right for them. And also that it's kind of like choice in the Wisca original model of maybe you won't take the salmon and you'll save on everything else, get more options for greater variety, and use your remaining, whether it's your SNAP dollars or your cash, to go to the store and buy the item that's right for you. And like really empowering people to make those decisions and those choices that are right for them.
That's great. That's wonderful. Greg, can you add a little bit to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny the why, and I think at conferences like this, we're pretty much you're somewhat preaching to the choir a bit, but it's always I will always remind people, and it's not my phrase, but right, like this idea of like Wisca has been around 42 years in emergency feeding, and what we know is emergencies don't last decades, right? Emergencies are supposed to last weeks, right? This isn't an emergency. This is an absolutely broken system. So if you think the way you're doing your work is the answer, and you've been around for 40 years, you have to be wrong, right? Like the system is broken. So we have to be thinking of how to adjust the system. And so it's why everything we do, we're thinking about that. Like we're focused on dignity and the community and choice. And when we think about dignity, it's why when we get a truckload of ultra processed canned goods with, I have a box of it sitting on my desk that I keep as a reminder of like things with 42% sodium for the day and like a little can that came during COVID. And we're like, we're not taking this. And if someone sends me a truckload of soda, I'm going to make them come back and pick it up. And I'll be told, oh, your corporate donors will be upset about this. I'm like, actually, we have lots of people in our community who donate to us, and that's a wonderful thing. But we work for our customers. We don't work for our donors. Like we're not at the end of a supply chain. And I think we have to remember that, like, how are we fixing the system? And I think that's a big part of this is if you're just handing out whatever, we have donors who walk in and say, I brought these canned goods for you. And I'm like, actually, and we're like, they're all dented and they're old. And why are you giving this to us? Like, well, someone will want it. I'm like, no, this is not going to be good for someone's health. This is, and I think we have to keep reminding ourselves that, like, if the system is broken, we have to work to change the system. And it means we can't just function at an individual personal level. Like this isn't about if we give people food, everything will be better. It's how do we change things at a city, a state, and a federal level? And I think that's where we have to get to.
I mean, those sound like some pretty big challenges. So how would you measure success towards that goal?
I would not measure it by poundage. I think we're forced to. Jessica and I both can spit out, I can spit out, poundage in produce versus non-produce and fresh versus non-fresh and per quarter and per customer versus household. I would measure it by how we actually lift people up out of food insecurity. I would measure it by different outcomes. Like it's a journey for people. We're just thinking about how we shift some of our outcome measures. Like I want to see how a customer feels 5 years from now. It's not that they didn't come to our pantry, but gee, am I engaged in the community because I do advocacy or I volunteer? That might be really huge to someone who's a senior who might be feeling isolated. They might be getting food from all sorts of avenues. So, we use pounds of produce, our ratio of produce, as a measure to keep us on track. Like we'll always stay above 50% fresh produce, which means we'll give out about, let's see, I know the numbers, 2 million pounds of produce this year, fresh produce. And that's been a battle because some of our donors had told us in the past, well, we care about the efficiency of poundage. And I'm like, I actually don't care about the efficiency of poundage. I care about how much health in poundage are we bringing to people, which means we're going to have to give more fresh produce. And we're going to decrease our numbers because we're not going to give out ultra processed products. And so we started to shift those numbers, and we want to see how many, we measure how many cash and non-cash benefits our teams get customers signed up to. Like, are we getting people the whole wraparound approach? I think another layer we haven't got to yet is it's like, how do we measure this collaboration? Because that's going to be big to me. Like, how do we maximize donor dollars across organizations? Like, I have common funders for example, with New York Common Pantry, who's also in our roundtable, we went to a funder and said, we want to become more efficient. So can you fund the two of us together to pick up food together at Hunts Point Market? We'll share a driver and a truck. And so now we're getting more food and it costs us less money. That's a measure of efficiency. I don't know how to measure it fully yet at all, but I think it's somewhere we have to get to. Like, how do we measure the time of collaboration versus the time of working in isolation? I guess I'd say the measures are as broken as the system.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Jessica, is there anything you want to add to that profound statement?
I think that the piece of dignity, which Greg touched on, but it's, do our clients prefer using the system and accessing food in this way? Does this concept of choice, which resonates with me in so many parts of my life, play out as we expect it to? And so far the answer has been yes, but I think we also have to be open to kind of following the data on that and seeing how it evolves. And certainly Greg's comment about bringing food to people as opposed to people to food may be a next iteration of that. But as it stands now, we found that allowing people to reserve their food in advance, which is essentially what our system allows people to do, reduces anxiety, right? You show up to a pantry and you're concerned that if you're not first in line, are you going to get the same access that the person or the 100 people, I was at a pantry last week that had 2,000 people, literally 2,000 people ahead of them. If you're 2001, you're not feeling so great, right? You're worried about what's going to be left and what's there for you. The ability of an online system to allow people, like we do in so many parts of our lives, to place the order and then get the thing and expect that thing is there because it's ours now. And this intervention allows for that. And so, again, we see that is resonating with clients, that is reducing their anxiety, improving their sense of control, because they can now, again, know that information in advance, meal plan, shop plan, like plan for their shopping and all of the other things. But again, if the information on that changes because there's yet another innovation that people find more rewarding for accessing the emergency food, we'll have to stay on top of that trend as well.
Great. Do any of you have any final thoughts about client choice before we move on to collective action? All right. So let's move on to discussing the collective work. Ben, we've kept you quiet for too long. Do you mind getting us started by sharing a little bit about how the collective got started and its impact so far?
Of course, my pleasure. Thanks, Kara. So I'm a senior consultant with KKNP, and I'm kind of facilitator and strategic partner to the collective group. The group, which we have formally called the Collective, has a new official name, the Roundtable, Allies for Food Access. I may forget and call it the Roundtable the Collective a few times, but we're the Roundtable now. So Greg initiated the Roundtable on behalf of WSCA back in 2018, out of an interest in exploring what potential savings might be accomplished with other emergency food organizations by pooling the collective purchasing power of these organizations. So when the group was initiated, in addition to WSCA, it included New York Common Pantry, St. John's Bread and Life, and Project Hospitality. It's 4 organizations. Our first phase was really kind of a deep dive research on existing and past purchasing to get a sense of what kind of volumes and types of products and tempo of food purchasing occurred across these organizations. We found that collectively they were spending almost $1.5 million on food exclusive of government grants. So once we had a pretty detailed sense of what their purchasing looked like, we were able to kind of vet some various opportunities and vendor relationships. And in 2019, we ran a 6 to 8 month pilot that kind of tested some of those opportunities and vendors. Through that pilot, we documented nearly 20% savings across the 4 participating organizations compared to the prices that were being paid before for the same food. that to us was quite a success. Our goal when we set out actually was to accomplish 5% savings, and we got close to 20%. So it was a real proof of concept for us, and we knew that we wanted to continue the work of the group. A secondary objective in those first 2 stages of work was really to kind of just test the idea of these organizations collaborating with each other and creating this platform for mutual support and mutual benefit. So Greg secured funding for an additional phase of work. We were our kickoff for that next phase of work was scheduled for March 16th, 2020. A memorable date for all of us, I think. I mean, in New York City, that was the first date that New York City schools closed. I remember Chef Greg emailed me on that Sunday before and said, let's cancel the kickoff, but let's actually do a quick check-in with everyone just to see how everyone's doing. And so, we kind of adjusted course for the last year due to COVID. I mean, but the challenges of the past year really have only underscored the value of this collaborative group and platform. One of the goals for this past group was to expand, welcome new organizations into the fold. So we've been so thrilled to have Jessica and Met Council join us, as well as Holy Apostle Soup Kitchen. So we grew from 4 organizations to 6 organizations. The pandemic really scrambled everyone's purchasing. I mean, there were a lot of donated food, there were these new government grants. So everyone was kind of helping each other figure out those new flows of money and food along the way. And I think the last thing I'll say on this and then kind of pause or open it up is a real shift in focus to advocacy. I think these organizations have kind of, discovered the collective power of their voice for advocacy and the voice of organizations who are doing this kind of direct service. And I think Jessica and Greg, I'm sure you can comment more on this, but I think there was a real opportunity to kind of lean into that role as a collective advocacy voice for those organizations. So that has become an increasing focus. And we are now, shifting into another phase, another year of work together. We'll be focusing more on kind of circling back to the purchasing piece and continuing our work on advocacy. And we can talk more about next steps, but I'll pause there.
Great. Jessica, do you want to jump in and share your pieces in this collaborative or roundtable?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll just go first because I'll just go from the more historical and let you be more current. Because one of the things when I first started approaching people, and it was literally my first month on the job, I went to different emergency food providers and folks like Steve Grimaldi at New York Common Pantry, and I went down to St. John's Bread and Life, and they were like, we love this idea, because I come from the restaurant world, right? Like I was used to fighting with my purveyors all the time to get better pricing, because it's just the name of the game. They always float the pricing. This is not new. It's not just for the for-profit sector. I started seeing it in the nonprofit sector, and I'm like, if we share data, we will save money. I knew that, and so I pitched it to a couple foundations. 3 all supported us on this. Sea Change Capital, New York State Health Foundation, and Robinhood all put money in to support us bringing on. And this is the key thing, is we brought on Ben and KKMP because none of us have the time and we didn't have the expertise to do this kind of data crunching and follow-up off the sides of our desk. Like it would have fallen in any one organization, and I'll say except maybe Met Council, because it's just their scale and scope is, greater probably than all of our other organizations were combined. But so we brought on external people with expertise and brain power. And just by the way, funders have loved this as well, because we're collaborating and we're getting really good data. And so I think that was really important, I think, to show in the proof of concept of let's go after food first, because we knew that we would save money. And it would, therefore, any organization would be happy to join because we're saving them money. And then we could jump off from there. But that's where sort of I was pushing from, and it's been delightful to see how far it's gone. And like then this year when we got to Ben's point, the last meeting we took was with a funder who we just actually found out this week that from UJA is going to be funding us for the coming year. But it took a year to get that. But that's what we had to do, is go after funders to be able to help the network and bring in amazing partners like Jessica and Met Council.
Thanks, Greg. I would just also add that, time is also money, right, as the saying goes. And so we save actual money by sharing this information. But especially during COVID, but not only, there have been so many opportunities to learn from our peers and to bring down those barriers of competition, which could be felt as competition, or to just really understand how people were doing their work in these very difficult times. And I don't think they are limited to COVID, meaning it was a crisis. So our guards were really low in a sense, and we were able to really lean into this really open dialogue. But there have been numerous other instances, including some crises of their own. I mean, WSCA had a very significant event a number of months ago that we all wanted to support them, but we also wanted to understand how to learn from them should we ever face similar situations, and building that network. And I know many of us have professional or personal networks that we can call on, but creating the structure around it and saying that we're all really invested in our shared success, because this is the success of people we serve, that this isn't about our egos or individual organizations. This is about creating and strengthening the fabric of services that are offered to often vulnerable New Yorkers at a vulnerable time, was really, really valuable. And so in that sense, there's the money savings, but there's also so many other savings and efficiencies that were gained by this group of people coming together.
Great. Thanks, Jessica. So it sounds like this idea of a collaborative is pretty innovative in itself. So we already talked about a lot of different ways it's innovative. I don't know if there's any other, ideas that the three of you have to touch on in terms of, what makes it innovative. Or if we could talk a little bit about why.
I mean, I can start with just the one example, and back to Jessica bringing up sort of things that happened during the pandemic, right? Like vaccines, I think is a great example. And I think this goes to advocacy. And it was, the roundtable also, connecting with Natasha and the team at the food pantries and the sort of state network, the CFAN network, and saying none of our emergency food personnel can get vaccines. This is an absurdity. And it took everyone, pushing really hard behind the scenes. And eventually, I remember being on a call with the head of the vaccines for the state on a Sunday afternoon, and them saying, we've heard your repeated advocacy. And so they relented and allowed emergency food workers to be vaccinated. But I do believe that it wouldn't have happened. And I can guarantee it would not have happened without frontline emergency food organizations, such as everyone who's probably on this conference. It was not the larger players across the state who initiated the push. It was the frontline organizations. It was not truthfully, it was not the food bank network. We had to push them. And I think that's important to realize, is everyone on this call in this conference has a really important frontline voice. And I think the collaborative, what was innovative, is that we've just started to push that as is the whole more important than the individual, the opposite of how many people in America think right now, in terms of vaccines and other things. But I think we've set aside not differences, but anything to make sure, because to Jessica's point, time is money. We save so much time, figuring out where should we be ordering masks from, 14 months ago. How do we get the boatload of vaccine or boatload of masks to be shipped over from China? Literally, these are the discussions we were having. We would have all been spending hours separately on these things. And I think sometimes the most simple things are the most important innovations. And I think during the COVID pushed us, because we were probably all scared and we didn't have the time. And so we were forced to lean on each other outside of our organizations to other people's expertise. And I think it's a testament to just, I guess it's partly the power of people in emergency feeding, but also the groups we sort of were able to assemble.
Great.
Yeah, just to jump in, I think there's something to be said for the trust that has kind of been built in among the participating organizations, and I think that even having that kind of first initial project of the purchasing, which was pretty just nitty gritty, crunching invoices, looking at vendor relationships, there was having that kind of background of relationship building and trust development across the group, I think is so critical to all the work that we've done since. And likewise, I mean, Jessica, I don't know if you would have a sort of perspective on, not to be a play moderator here and take a question over, but sort of, as you joining the group in this past year, sort of what that experience was like or trajectory was like in terms of that engaging with a pre-existing group.
Yeah, I think that the moment really there was no time to sit on the sidelines of anything.
Right.
And so if I was going to be a part of this group, I was going to be a part of this group. And they were very welcoming. We were all in the trenches. I'm sure everyone participating in this food summit today, this time last year was still very much a war zone, at least in New York City. And it felt very, very challenged. And to have a group that we could come in and be very action oriented, and we, there really wasn't an emergency on our hands. The reality is the idea that there are New Yorkers or Americans who don't have enough food to eat, we should always feel this sense of urgency. But the reality is that COVID obviously brought new energy to that and new emphasis to that. And this group was just a really tremendous source of support, but also motivation and resource for making sure we were using all of our resources as effectively as possible. And this maybe isn't how is the group innovative in answer to your question, Kara, but as an example, in New York City, many of us were trying to figure out how to do home delivery or how to access Nourish New York product. And, with any of these things, there are barriers to overcome or hurdles here and there, twists and turns. And we were really able to share all of that as resources. Some of us had heads up on when decisions were going to be made at the city level or at the state level, and we could share that and say, hey, now's the time to press, and now's the time to lean into this piece or this narrative, and the ability to work together. In this, it shouldn't be innovative, honestly, but it is, and it really was essential. And I hope that both other groups find those people. And actually, I'll just share, because really I'm at the table thanks to UJA Federation, which really encouraged us to join this group. But it was because when I started in emergency food, I said, I feel like there should be a table where we're talking about these issues together, but I haven't found the table. And I was going to meetings, don't get me wrong, but I wasn't having this kind of collaboration and this kind of discussion, roll up your sleeves, let's work together to really be a source of support, pool resources, etc. And if your city doesn't have a table like this, stop looking and go out and create it, is what I would say.
I love that. I love that. And I think, that leads into a really great discussion about the success. And it's kind of related to how we talked about client choice. Like, how do we measure success for that? How do we measure success for the collaborative? Had there been any, decisions or discussions about how to, measure that to success, maybe beyond the vaccine approval for frontline workers? Ben, do you have anything to add there?
Well, in the first phase, success for us was savings, right? Like we set out with a very specific quantitative goal. We knew how to measure it. We accomplished it, and we said, well, let's keep doing this because we checked that box. Let's keep going. But you're right. I think beyond the very kind of specific quantitative purchasing work, it gets a little bit more qualitative. I think that we've got the advocacy wins under our belt, the vaccine piece and some other pieces related to some of the funding programs. I think that we've been doing an annual report every year. We're wrapping up our one right now for the past year and ask for kind of successes across the group, and every participating organization always has a lot of positive feedback just for the value of coming together. I mean, I think that at a very high level, the roundtable is successful if it's helping the participating organizations advance their own missions. And we have kind of a shared mission now, which I don't have in front of me. It's brand new, but it's making sure our neighbors don't go hungry. And so it's really about kind of maximizing resource use and collaboration across these organizations. Greg, Jessica, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
I guess I would add, one of the things we've said with all of our sort of, as we looked at goals each year, it was yes, there was definitely a cash part of like, are we going to save X dollars per, are the organizations, is it worth it for them to spend time on this because they'll save X percent, and we want to continue to have that as part of it, related to a baseline. Not every year you're going to save another like 20% beyond from the year before, but also that the organization that the entity is growing, right? And so part of that was that we will continue to bring on more groups. Now we're doing that at different levels to sort of increase the ability for different groups to engage, even if they don't have the same purchasing power that our groups do, right? Most of the groups who are right now in the roundtable all are getting state money that they can use directly to purchase food, cash food, not just drawing down through food bank mechanisms and others. So we're expanding that so that we can bring on some often smaller organizations so that they can sort of create another cohort. So we're creating tables, to Jessica's point, is part of this, right? So we create more tables for people to be at, create a bigger table, but also extra tables for folks as we grow. And I think part of related to that is, it seems very bureaucratic, but coming up with a name and a mission statement. We'll put up a little website soon just to be able to put, yearly reports and testimonies and things on that. And I think that's important. And we will have to think about in the coming, measure of success, like, does this become an entity in itself beyond just, sort of a hashtag or something, does it need to, because there's funding streams coming into it. And there could be more, and it depends what the role is. And maybe it's how we think about work with CFAN across the state. Like, there's a number of these entities like the Roundtable that exist, and we should be collaborating across and helping other ones thrive. So
that's a great, segue into something I wanted to add. As a board member for the food pantries, I just want to add that the learnings from the collective work that you all do have been instrumental in the collective action work that the food pantries of the Capital District is already doing in the Capital Region, but also with the New York State Food Assistance Network, CFAN. And so we're looking forward to continuing to learn together. So I'm happy to be a part of this discussion and carry this forward into our work, locally and statewide. So yeah, we have about 8 minutes left in the workshop, and I just want to thank everybody for their participation in this workshop. I didn't see any comments or questions come in. Hopefully that's not just my viewing issue, but if you do have a remaining question after the workshop is over, please know that there's an opportunity to network with today's speakers throughout the day and after the session is concluded through the Socio platform, and speaker contact information is available there. So we'll just wrap up by asking, I'd love to hear from each of you of what's next. How do you want to move forward from here? I don't know who wants to start, whoever would like to get started there.
I'll jump in, kind of building on what Greg was already saying. So I think we have, kind of 4 or 5 next steps for us as the roundtable. The first is kind of formalizing the group a bit more and having a more visible public presence in terms of a website. We have the new name, mission, etc. So that's part 1. We're kind of circling back to a bit of a focus on purchasing. We have a pretty solid handful of opportunities that we're kind of vetting and measuring. We have a really extensive database of purchasing from the past year, so we know what prices our groups are currently paying, and we have a good method for kind of vetting incoming opportunities, and we're exploring some things there. We're going to, of course, continue leaning into our advocacy work, and as Greg said, we have kind of 2 prongs for expanding the group, both adding 1 or 2 to kind of our central core group, and then providing some TA and guidance to smaller groups. So those are our next steps for the next year.
Great. Yeah, Jessica, do you want to add some more to that?
Well, just that given this platform of reaching so many people, I would just say that one, Met Council is so delighted to be a part of this group and to be with you here today. We also are incredibly committed to helping communities meet a kosher food need where it exists, and have recently expanded to halal communities as well, recognizing that traditional donated sources don't always keep these populations and these needs in mind. And we've just recently started a pilot in Westchester and are really thinking about all the ways that we can help other communities meet this need. So it may not seem like the technology innovation that we're speaking about today, but if anybody wants to connect about that or any of the things we discussed here, please feel free to be in touch with me and would love to brainstorm how we can help you do that.
That's really exciting, Jessica. Thank you. How about you, Greg? What do you see for the future?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, well, from WSCA's standpoint, and I've talked to a number of groups around the state about this, we're building out this sort of tech platform that will most likely be like patching a bunch of other systems together, right? Like we're not hopefully building all of our own systems, and Met Council and WSCA are both using sort of some of the same consultants, and sort of we sort of share a lot of information. But for us, we want to build this to be an open source model that other groups around the state, like we don't want to control it. I've just been very fortunate in some of the ways funding has come in that we can build something like this right now and have it evaluated. We'll have CUNY Urban Food Policy team is going to evaluate it. And then if we can find partners around the state who want to take it on, we'll push it out there as well. But we're not looking to grow outside of New York City, but we're willing to distribute a tool if we're the ones who have got it funded, because we're just about fighting hunger, not about, it's not about profit. So, but I think it goes along with the collective, right? Like we just want to share information, share data, share technology, and that's the way we're going to move things further faster. So I'm excited some of the learnings and wins of COVID, just excited to try to keep them going, because there are some good things that came out of COVID, and I think collaboration is one of them.
Great. Actually, I just saw a question pop in the chat box. So since we have a minute, I'm going to ask, it's just for Jessica. Is there a specific tech or platform or digital programs that you use to offer online ordering?
Sure. So we're currently using a platform developed with a company called Unicentric out of Pennsylvania, and another program here in New York City, a large pantry, New York Common Pantry, also uses them. And we're kind of similar to what Greg was just alluding to, as we continue to look to expand functionality, are undergoing a process to really assess the appropriate tools going forward. So again, anyone wants to be in touch, I would say, with either of our organizations. We don't have a lock on this, and certainly are looking to develop something based on the investment we make in the R&D that we do, that will be of benefit to emergency food providers, ideally nationwide.
Awesome. Such exciting stuff. I think that's a really great note to wrap up on. I just want to thank our three panelists again for sharing their expertise with all of us. And thanks to everyone who attended this workshop. On behalf of the Food Pantries for the Capital District Board of Directors, I want to thank you for attending today's Food Summit, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
You.